Hi, my name's Brad Costin and I'm from Agriculture Victoria, and I'm here today at a farm in Winton with Jim Shovelton from Meridian Agriculture, and we're going to show you some tips and some things you can do to better understand and read your paddock. When you walk into a client's paddock to help a farmer, what are some of the things that you might look for that guide you in your soil testing approach?
I think the first thing I'd say, Brad, is that I think you need to be doing this when the grass is growing. You need to be able to see the variation across the paddock. And I don't think you can do that when the paddock's dry. So going in spring is really critical, I think, in having a look at it. So the first thing that I do when I go into a paddock is look at where it's growing really well, because that actually tells you the potential. It's a matter of looking at that and then looking and trying to understand why the bits in between those good areas is not growing like you'd like it to go. The other thing that I think is really evident here in this paddock, and you often see it in a lot of cattle-based pastures, is that in the first year you get this urine patch, which makes the grass grow. The second year you've got a patch of potash left behind, and you've got clover growing there. So you'll see very clearly in this paddock there are patches of clover and patches where there are not clover. And again, you'll see in this paddock one of the real indicators of an open pasture are dandelions. So they're poor competitors, and when you get a good pasture, and you have a look where it's growing well, there are no dandelions. So again, it's a good indicator, and you won't pick that up until you actually do this during the growing season. Critical thing, if we're going to sample, is we're not interested in where the good bits are. We're interested in what the poor bits are.
They're the bits you want to actually lift in production.
We want to understand what's wrong with them.
Yeah.
And so people will take a random sample.
Yeah.
But my preference is to take what we call a poor patch sample. You avoid the good bits because you're not worried about them. It's the bits that are not growing that you want to sort out.
So Jim, we've just walked into the paddock here. What are the types of things you can see in this paddock that might give you an indication of how fertility might vary across the paddock? What would you be looking at?
Yeah, well, we've talked about just that really localised variation.
Yep.
The other thing you have to realise is that where you've got a paddock, and particularly if you run sheep, there's going to be a transfer of nutrients from the bottom of the paddock to the top of the paddock.
Right.
So there's been a movement of nutrients up there, and also a movement of alkalinity. So that the top part of the paddock is generally going to be the least acid, and the bottom part is going to be the most acid.
Yep.
So you've got to consider that, and often that'll be picked up with a bit of topography. So you need to understand where there might be changes in soil type, where because of that change in nutrient across the paddock, it's going to be worthwhile taking a separate sample out of those areas rather than just a blank sample over the whole area.
Hey, so Jim, you've taken me to this spot here. What is it that you can see in front of us here?
Well, Brad, this is an example of what I said about where the potential in a paddock is. So if you look at this little patch here, and you look at this patch here, the composition is basically the same. But what we've got here is massive growth, and really a very, very vigorous bit of pasture. And so, and what we've encouraged is really the ryegrass in the system. So the question is why are we getting this, and why isn't this growing like that? And one of the things that I think people probably need to understand is what we're trying to do with the soil testing is actually drive clover growth. Clover is the thing that actually puts nitrogen into the system that creates that effect. So if the clover's not growing well, then we're not going to get that nitrogen moving around the system, and we're not going to get this sort of vigorous response in our pastures.
So this is a response to the nitrogen then, just as you said?
This is a response to the nitrogen, and we'll show you an example of what I think is a response to potash in the second year. This is typically what we see in a second year urine patch, where we've got rid of the nitrogen effect that we saw before, and now we've got a patch of potash left behind. And you can see what the vigor of the clover has done. As I said, these dandelions are an indicator of an open pasture, and when we've got some vigor in there, they've basically disappeared out of the system. So these are a really good indicator of something missing in the paddock. Really good indicator.
Yeah, so managing your soil fertility actually helps you with your weed problem, I suppose.
And so the really critical thing, though, just going back to where you sample,
Yep.
You've got to avoid these sorts of these patches, because if they're a potash patch from last year,
Yep.
then you're going to skew the result, and
Yep.
you're going to miss the fact there's a potash deficiency in the paddock.
Yeah.
So this is, again, why I was saying that I'm a real fan of sampling in the spring, late winter, early spring period, mid-spring period,
Yeah.
rather than dry period, because dry period chicks just can't pick this up.
This project is funded by the Australian Government's National Landcare Program, Smart Farm Small Grants, Soil Extension Activities.